The gender gap only increases with age. Why are older men with grey hair called silver foxes, and older women are told to cover their grey because it ages them? And the invisibility of older women is real. Since turning 50, and even more since turning 60, I find it even harder to get service at a bar. We do become invisible. But I want to talk about the gender pay gap. There was a report out recently with lots of statistics, but it all boiled down to the fact that for every dollar a man makes, a woman makes only 78 cents. And the gap is widest in the top 20% of that pay level. So if women are being paid less, their value is less. And if their value is lower, they're going to be paid lower. And this ends up with a vicious cycle with women at the bottom end of the pay scale. So why is this so? Well, research shows that the main contributing factor is in the hiring of staff, and that men are still seen as a better candidate for a higher, more senior and higher paid role than women. And yet when I worked at the ABC in the 80s and 90s, it was the fairest workplace I've ever worked in, with women reflected across the organisation from the lowest paid level to the top. And I believe this is because they have very strong equal employment opportunity principles in place in the hiring. The other really important point towards the gender pay gap is the caring role, and the fact that women are still largely doing this, of course. And that means years out of the workforce, years often doing part-time work after that. And it means that over their lifetime, they acquire less savings, if any, less superannuation, if any, and less opportunity to go for more senior roles. And with less money comes less power and less control. And we see this in many of our clients. And it's borne out by the increasing numbers of older women sleeping in their cars, certainly in northern New South Wales, where I work and live. And I'm sure it's reflected everywhere. Another growing demographic is older women gambling. And this only increases and exacerbates their problems. They're looking for, they're going gambling because of hope and desperation. So with this lower money and power and control, it inevitably leads to lower self-esteem. And I believe this low self-esteem actually is a reason why women carry a heavier burden of debt. For everyone, having a debt relieved, whether it's by a waiver or a payment plan or whatever else, is of course fantastic psychologically and financially. But for women who are weighed down so much already with everything they've been through and the low self-esteem, the women that are suffering that low self-esteem, the release of that debt enables the relief to be all the greater. And I have a case study that illustrates this well. Let's call her Gloria. She was in her 60s and retired from a shoulder injury. She didn't have her own income, Centrelink income, because her husband was still working. But he would not even give her $1 of her own to spend on herself or to go for a coffee with friends. And her dignity would not allow her to ask someone to pay for her. She was very lonely, and she ended up gambling, of course. And inevitably, she ended up with she was using an old credit card she had had previously that she had never used. She inevitably ended up with a large credit card debt, as happens with gambling. Luckily, she found her way to a financial counsellor and a gambling counsellor. The financial counsellor initially recommended that she go bankrupt, that she declare bankruptcy. But Gloria wasn't ready for this. She had always paid her debts, and she was really horrified by that suggestion. She was then referred to me, and I simply dug a little bit deeper. And I found that on top of the credit card debt and the gambling problem and the loneliness, she was also suffering such isolation, it really constituted financial abuse, and she was suffering daily verbal abuse from her husband. So I managed to negotiate a debt waiver for the credit card, which was fantastic. But more importantly, I believe, I managed to get her onto a Centrelink income payment under the living separately under the same roof rule. This changed everything for her. When she came to see me that last time in my office, self-esteem radiated from her. She held her head higher and she walked more lightly. She smiled as she told me that having her independent income had not only increased her sense of freedom and independence, but her husband had also stopped verbally abusing her. So from a couple of actions, there was a lot of ripples going on there. So where does this leave us? Well, there's been a couple of pieces of legislation recently that are really positive. Firstly, the Fair Work Commission has agreed to increase the rate of pay for aged care workers. Secondly, the federal government has agreed to pay superannuation to those on a Commonwealth paid parental leave. So both of those things actually affect a largely female workforce. They both recognise the value of the caring role, and they both take us just a step closer to retirement savings equity, which is the black swan or the flying pig in this scenario. So we're certainly not there yet. We've got a long way to go, but both those things are taking us a step closer. So we can feel quite disheartened when we look at how wide the gender pay gap still is and how far we've got to go. But I think it's really important to reflect on how far we have come since the 1920s and those days of the brave suffragettes who fought so hard for change. I became a financial counsellor because I wanted to make more of a direct difference. And in this role, we certainly can. I love this job more than any I've done in a long and varied working life. And I often reflect how lucky we are to get the gratitude we do almost daily just for doing our job. Not that the job is easy. As you would all know, the job is often very hard and very stressful. But gosh, we get to make such a difference to people's lives. So I'd like to say, well done, all you fabulous financial counsellors and capability workers, because we make changes with what we do and the referrals we make. And we really do need to just keep digging deeper and making more ripples and getting those pigs to fly. Thank you.